Fighting at your corner, he is a black belt in Taekwondo and is a stand management expert, coming in at 5 feet 7 inches tall, weighing in at 155 pounds from Berkeley, California. From the Amalgam Insights Gym, the lightweight champion of the world in IT expense reduction, the king of cost cutting, the sultan of stand, the people's champion. Welcome to the ring, Hyoun!
Oh wow, that was an introduction. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for attending, and well, let's actually try something here. Let's give a big hand to Bruce Buffer for that amazing introduction. What I want you to do is go into that chat room that you see right there and just pound, 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 or hashtag, hashtag, hashtag. Let's show some applause for Bruce for that. That was so good. So, in addition, you might be noticing that this is a recorded session. So, through the tricks of the internet, I'm actually in the chat room with you. So feel free to ask me any questions as things show up, and I'll be providing some additional comments as well. But thank you so much for coming in today and investing in yourself. This is a scary time, no doubt. We are in the middle of a pandemic and a recession. We've got civil protests, we've got global warming, like wow, all sorts of things are happening here. And all the while, we are trying to figure out how do we cut costs and be good stewards for our companies, right? So, we've got a great show for you here today. We've got 15 sessions, we've got over 20 experts, including the #1 cloud influencer in the world, Corey Quinn. We've got Larry Foster, who is inducted into the Enterprise Technology Management Association Hall of Fame based on his contributions to technology management. We've got some of your peers here, like Andy TEM Girl Pringle, as well as Malcolm Montanaro from Barclays. We've got executives like Shane Hansen from Planfold. We have so many smart people here to help you understand how to deal with technology expenses. You're going to have a great time here. Now, I should also point out that our event is thankful for our sponsors, MobiCord, Upland Software, Vision Wireless, as well as WidePoint. All 4 of them have contributed to this event. Apparently you can't make events for free. So this has been really helpful in providing you with both the gifts as well as the charities that we are donating to. So as you know, we are now donating $40, $10 per sponsor, per attendee for each of you who come here, and we will announce at the end of the event just how much we've raised together. So thank you so much for that as well. But I want to point out, this is your time. Much like the recessions of 2000 and 2008, this is your time to shine. And the only problem is getting companies to understand just how important this time is in terms of having your input and your capabilities put into place. We've got 3 key goals that I think about as we look at this world of technology expense management. Of course, we're trying to cut costs and save jobs. That is the goal that we are looking at right here. Of course, in the here and now, a lot of jobs have been lost. We actually have a lot of that money that can bring the job back hiding in our IT subscriptions and IT costs. A second aspect I want you to think about is the shift to IT subscriptions. IT is changing from an asset-based to a service-based capability. Third of all, I want you to think about the future of financial preparation for digital transformation. These are the 3 key goals that can all be conducted through technology expense management. In my career, I've noticed that with every recession that occurs, and I've been through a couple of them now, shift happens? I said shift. What happens is that with every recession, we figure out something new and different about the technology world. And in this case, let's take a look at a couple of examples. In 2000, we were dealing with the dot-com world, right? Everybody built a website in 1998, 1999, and they thought that would be enough to make them billionaires. So everybody built the websites, and then around the beginning of 2000, we realized, nah, that's not going to make everything work. So we had this huge recession, right? But what happened right after that recession? We started seeing the emergence of software as a service, as companies like Salesforce, NetSuite, Concur, Intact, all these enterprise software companies started showing up as cloud-based companies that ended up getting valuations of hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, becoming titans and market leaders in their industries. So an opportunity occurred for those who understood that transition. Next, 2008, what happened? Well, 2008 was a little different, but we saw some technology changes as well there. After that global recession, what started happening? Well, first of all, on the mobility side, prior to 2008, the king of mobility was obviously BlackBerry. We all remember our Crackberries, typing them. As after 2008, what happened? We started having these new phones, the iPhones, as well as the Android-based phones, the Samsung phones. And they were just so different from a touch screen and an app perspective. They changed the way that we dealt with enterprise mobility. And that was a fundamental change that you have noticed over the past decade. Another shift occurred in that we stopped thinking about servers to the same extent. You know, in the 2000s, we actually all bought servers because they were an easy way to put an app in something that was in your room or in your small business. Now, after 2008, we replaced those servers with what we call the cloud. Obviously, Amazon Web Services was the leader in this and still is, but we started moving to the mindset that we could move to the cloud if we wanted to do anything as a startup. So, when we think about this, you know, we've got this mobility change, we've got this cloud change. Now, where are we headed with all this? Well, because of this, we used to talk about TEM as being telecom expense management, because back in the day, 10, 15 years ago, telecom was over $1 trillion market globally, and everything else was just tiny. Nowadays, because of the emergence of cloud and software as a service, we now have to think about this in more of a technology expense management capability, where technology requires a variety of skills and takes up a variety of categories. And I advise taking a life cycle approach. About a decade ago, when I first became an industry analyst, one of the things I noticed was that people talked about this expense management capability as just processing bills. And I thought, oh, that's not right. Having done this job, I know there's so much more to it than that. Because I remember working with help desk. I remember working on service orders. I remember working on account management. I remember working on purchasing. I remember working on tech portfolios and figuring out what we had from an inventory perspective, as well as thinking about this from a finance and planning and budgeting perspective. I'm not saying I did all of it. You know, we had our CFO, our accountants, our lawyers, our procurement people, you know, all sorts of other people involved in that. But I remember being a part of that process across everything that we did in technology. And this life cycle here is a core part of understanding how to do that on an ongoing basis. So, as I mentioned before, we've got these three goals: cut costs, save jobs; managing IT as subscription services and on-demand services; as well as dealing with financial preparation for digital transformation. But let's face it, we're doing it in some really weird times. Like, remember the good old days when we used to send kids to these things called schools? Like, that's not happening right now, right? And then we have these odd trends that have been showing up. Like, who would have thought that stress baking would have been a thing, or that flour would have been impossible to find in grocery stores? And then we're finding, you know, even weirder, like goats. Like, apparently there's this thing where goats show up at your meeting and people pay for this. Apparently people just love watching goats show up at these virtual meetings because we have nothing else to do. And of course, Why would you want to pay attention to your colleagues? But how ridiculous is that? Who would even do something like that? And how did the goats get on this presentation? And who invited you? We have some serious problems that we're dealing with right now, obviously. So, for instance, 60 million employees in the United States are currently working from home full time, which is about 10 times what it used to be. At the same time, we're dealing with COVID. The pandemic is still around, and quite frankly, it would be amazing to see a vaccine ready before the middle of next year. It's just how drug discovery and development works. It takes 12 to 18 months to develop anything from scratch. And we know that we didn't know about this until basically January of this year. So just do the math. How do we, getting to about June of 2021 before we have any sort of real vaccine is probably where we're realistically at. And this is assuming nothing goes wrong during the development process or the virus doesn't mutate. Who knows what's really going to happen there. We still have civil protests happening. We are trying to fundamentally figure out what is happening. What is the role of government? What is the role of law enforcement? What's the role of race in society and how we've been treating it? These are really deep, meaningful questions, and we have a lot of conflict within our society, and honestly that adds a lot of fluctuation to our everyday life as well, just trying to figure out what's going on there. And then jobless claims. We have probably still over 30 million people who are currently claiming some sort of jobless compensation, which is just stunning to think about. There's just so many people looking for jobs or trying to figure out their next job or waiting to be off of furlough. So in this context, I think that those of us in the technology expense world are fundamentally underestimating our impact. And what do I mean by that? So most of us have experience with invoices, inventories, understanding how technology is being used. So let me put it to you this way. Knowledge is power. We all learned that statement early, to the point that nobody even doubts it at this point. But think about this. Communications, applications, data, all of this is our ways of transferring knowledge. So what are we really doing when we are managing these things? We are actually providing the financial management and sometimes physical management, service management of the ways we transfer knowledge and power within our organization. That's really powerful. It's really powerful capability. And we can choose to accept that and say, wow, that's a really strategic source of data and information that we have. Or we can just discount it and say, oh, I'm the person who just processes bills and that's all I have. You actually collect so much more than that when you're doing this job. And I think that's a massive opportunity. And at the same time, you have to figure out where that data comes from. From my perspective, I think that data comes from having a clean environment. Because as tech is becoming more consumable, accessible, ephemeral, disposable, unmanageable, it's harder to keep clean, right? So how do you keep this environment clean as technology becomes smaller and easier to use? To give you an idea of that, I want to invite my friend Melissa Homer to the stage. Melissa Homer is a world-renowned cleaning expert. She is the Chief Cleaning Officer at MadePro, and she has some perspectives on how to keep things clean in today's environment.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa Homer, Chief Cleaning Officer of MadePro, and I'm here to talk to you again about masks. Masks are underwear for your face. No, really. They're face panties. Once you learn that cloth masks are face panties, all my training's done. It's so simple. You'd never leave the house without a fresh pair of panties on. You'd never wear panties you wore yesterday without washing them. You'd never pull your panties down to make it easier to fart in the customer's house, would you? Okay, there. Everything you need to know about face masks I've taught you. Put a new fresh pair on daily. Wash it after you wear it. If you get something nasty on it, change it. If it gets all old and torn, stop wearing it. Easy, right? And also, you can't unsee this, so now I know you know the rules. Simple.
Masks are underwear for your face. Okay, got it, Melissa. Thank you so much for that. Oh, man. But here's the thing. It's funny. When she was talking about masks, I actually found that interesting because I found it very comparable to how we think about some aspects of technology. This technology, we take it wherever we go, especially our cloud-based services and our phones. You want to replace them when they get outdated, when they're too dirty, when they're not functioning. We are talking about a more consumerized view of technology or masks or underwear in this case. I guess IT is now the underwear of the business or something. Anyways, I have a better idea. Instead of me trying to explain this, let me introduce Tony Cabral to you. He is a cheater for entertainment purposes, and I think he's going to show you something that you've never really seen before.
Thank you for that introduction, Hyoun. My name is Tony Cabral. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts, and I specialize in card cheating for entertainment purposes only. It's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Now, I say that because I make my living manipulating a deck of playing cards, and let's face it, when you have skills like these, yeah, they pay for themselves one way or another. But of course, it's possible to cheat at any game, as long as that game is played for money. And that includes anything, say for example, with dice, like the game of craps or even Yahtzee. Now, every honest pair of dice on the planet has the numbers 1 through 6, and the opposite sides have to total 7. It's a security measure. It's a way you know you're dealing with honest dice. So if that's a 1, then that should be a 6. If the 2s are here, then that should be a 5. And if the 4s are here, that should be a 3. Now, the reason I brought that up is the most common way to cheat with dice is dice with the wrong numbers on them, misprinted dice. You buy them as special, they cost a lot, but they pay for themselves eventually. Let me show you what I mean. If I show you a 5 and a 6, the other side ought to be a 2 and a 1. So that's a 2 and a 1. This side is different from this side because these are honest dice. But if you're looking at a 5 and a 6 here, and I'm looking at a 5 and a 6 on this side, that means somebody's cheating. Because you can't have the same number here that you do here. These are honest dice. The other side's a 2 and a 1. And it goes in the other direction, of course. If you see a 2 and a 1 here, I can't be looking at a 2 and a 1 on this side because these are honest dice. The other side's a 5 and a 6. Okay, that's way too much math for me right now. Let's talk about pairs. Pairs are easier for me to wrap my skull around. If I show you a pair of 5s, the other side ought to be a pair of 2s. So that's a pair of 5s, and that's a pair of 2s. Thank God for that. This is a pair, so this has to be a pair because these are honest dice. Never get hung up on the numbers. Just because that adds up to 10 and that adds up to 4 doesn't mean the math is going to work out, because if there's a pair on this side, well, you have to see a pair on this side. These are honest dice. I'll put it another way. If I'm looking at 3 and 1, you should be looking at 6 and 4, but that's too much math. That's why I brought up pairs in the first place. I hope you're coming with me on that. And it's going to get subtle, so buckle up. 6 and a 3. If you see 6 and a 3 here, I should be looking at a 4 and a 1. Now that's a 4 and a 1, except these are honest dice. So if that's the 4, that shouldn't be a 6. That doesn't add up to 7. If that's the 3, that shouldn't be the 1. That doesn't add up to 7. None of those numbers add up right. These are honest dice. I checked them out. The other side of the 6 should be where the 1 is. Now, if you've ever been around a craps table, you might see some people who blow in the dice before they throw them. They say it's for luck. Those are the people I watch out for, because those are the people who tend to get you in trouble. I'll put that back. I'll do it again. Watch. That's fun. I'm just going to do it slow motion for the camera. And one for me, because I'm the only one here. Now, I'm throwing a lot of combinations at you, no pun intended, and the good news is you don't have to remember them all. I don't. I like beer. Really what it comes down to is simple counting math. So the next time you're around a craps table, the only thing you need to take away from this little demonstration is that's 1. That's 2 and 3. That's 4 and 5. And that's 6. And you'll never lose any money at dice for the rest of your life. Any questions? Because I have a ton. I don't know how that works. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Tony Cabral. It's been a pleasure.
Wow. So, that was something. I assume those are honest dice. I looked at the 1 and 6 just like you did, and I still don't know what happened. That said, that's what Tony can do with just 2 dice. The point here is that by using basic tools and just doing something a little bit differently, you can create magic. You know what? And I think you've got the opportunity to create some magic and enhance your skills as well from a technology expense management perspective, and do things that your company hasn't even begun to imagine. So, how do you do this? Let me start with 3 broad suggestions. The first is to move beyond your knowledge. So, most of us have some core skill set in telecom, or network, or mobility, or software as a service, or infrastructure as a service. And we are managing the bills there. Perhaps if we're working at the enterprise level, these are million-dollar bills, multi-million-dollar bills, and our focus and time is spent just on that. But take a look at what else is going on, especially if you're working with public cloud infrastructure. You should understand networking. If you're working with your mobility, you should understand SaaS, and vice versa, SaaS and mobility. These are SaaS and apps. What is more natural than apps and mobile phones? Second of all, think beyond your process. It's important to know what is going on in the other departments, whether that be help desk, sourcing, procurement, finance, accounting, or just the other parts of IT that you're working with as well. Obviously, if you're working in telecom, you want to know about networking, call center, collaboration, email, etc. You want to understand the ecosystem that is surrounding what you manage. So go beyond your process, your department, and think about the other departments that you're also potentially working with. Third, think beyond yourself. Beyond the individual contributor level. Your job is not just to manage a spreadsheet, as good as that feels. And I say that very personally. I love working with spreadsheets. I used to spend all day in my spreadsheets and in my systems and in my databases and tuning and indexing, and this is so good. However, there is more to sharing what you do and having that message understood by your company than simply living in your data. You've also got to set up these cross-departmental meetings. You've got to have your stakeholders understand what you do. Perhaps you talk at events like this to help other people understand your role and your skills. But it's important to reach out, have these meetings, work with your stakeholders, and do this on a regular basis so that you are managing the people who are associated with what you do. This matters as well. And by doing these 3 things, going beyond your knowledge, beyond your process, beyond yourself, you start building a bridge to the future. So, what does the future look like? Well, before we brought up the 2000 and 2008 recessions and showed the shifts that happened during each recession. However, 2020 will be a little bit different because we're not just dealing with a recession as if that weren't enough. We are dealing with a lot of issues at one time. And because we are dealing with both these geographic issues, these social issues, as well as these economic issues, here are 4 themes that I think are going to come up for you. The first is around the continuing shift of IT assets going to IT as a service. So technology as a service. Right now, IT subscriptions make up about 40% of IT. The other 60% is still stuff. And that stuff is going to be more and more increasingly either in the cloud or related to telecom services. Second trend, work from home. Obviously, we are all working from home right now. Most knowledge workers are, most technical workers are. But what does that really mean? Honestly, at this point, when you think about it and when you look out at the world, about 60% of American workers are working from home full-time. Obviously, when offices are able to open up again, we're going to change that to some extent. But my best guess, and our firm's best guess, is that about 25 to 30% of employees overall are going to stay at home. So basically, half the people who are stuck at home right now are going to choose to stay at home because of the flexibility, cost, all sorts of other reasons, while the other half will go back into the office. This means a fundamental shift in how we manage our employees, because no longer do we prepare the desk for everybody. We have to start thinking about how we're going to support people at home and what they really need. And we're starting to run into some of the challenges of working from home. For instance, these virtual meetings don't work quite as well as face-to-face, as wonderful as they are. Seeing everybody in that tiny little box all day long and staring at that screen can be really exhausting, right? So we have to start thinking about perhaps other technologies that will help us with that, whether it's just around better video quality, better tools, second screen. Some of these things we think of as luxuries right now might actually be necessary to support work from home productivity. Third of all, thinking about moving from paper and data cleaning and swapping data from one place to another with digital transformation. Digital transformation is definitely a huge trend at the CIO level. Nobody is giving up their digital transformation processes, and frankly, you don't want to be dealing with paper and trying to figure out how to get those forms from the office to home and back. So there are goals right now to obviously get rid of paper, get rid of data. Fourth of all is thinking about robotic process automation and getting rid of both the copy and pasting that you do, as well as the manual auditing and data quality processes that you go through. Why should you have to do any of that in theory when that can all be robotically processed? In doing so, you should think about your job and where you're spending or wasting all of your time checking things one by one or moving things from one place to another when you could have a process do that, and then think about what else you can be doing with all of that time. So here are my recommendations. Here's the takeaways I want you to get from this. First of all, you've got to keep upgrading your skills. It is not enough to just be a telecom pro or a cloud pro and think that's enough, because we are going towards a world where IT as a whole is becoming a set of services that requires vendor management and service management. The more you can understand about this, the more you will be able to understand how your company works. Second of all, build out that TEM team across technology expense management. Think about who's dealing with the contracts, who's dealing with the services, who is dealing with the financing and the budgeting, who is responsible for all of the aspects of the technology, because you will have to talk to them at some point if you want to do your job as well as you can. This is imperative. There's a huge team. I'm going to talk in the closing remarks about the team that I've worked with and the people that I have to thank for being in this situation, but there's a lot of them, and for you, there should be a lot of them as well. Next, do magic with ordinary things. What we've seen today just shows what you can do just with ordinary materials if you know what you're doing. Take inspiration from that and try to do that as well with what you have. Do some magic with what you've got. Next, masks are underwear for your face. Definitely an important one to learn for your personal life, but probably an interesting one for IT as well, especially as we're dealing with all the personal tech that we have that get dirty, things that go with us wherever we go. And how do we treat that? From an inventory perspective, from a service perspective, from an expense perspective. All of that matters as well. So think about that. And finally, prepare for the future. I gave you those 4 key themes: IT as a service, work from home, digital transformation, and robotic process automation. All 4 of these are going to affect your job, and you should be proactive in understanding how they will affect you. I hope this sets the stage for you for a fun, fruitful, and educational day at TEM Expo. Thank you.